Hey guys, it's Malthor here once again, giving you a video on what is supposed to be my day off for the first time in like 45 days, just because the balance in Path of Exile Synthesis Development Manifesto has come out, and I think it's worth talking about, so I figure I'll jump right in and go over a few of the thoughts I have on the changes that are coming and what they might mean to you or to me and throughout the synthesis gameplay. So as they have mentioned, this is supposed to be kind of a spellcaster balancing patch, and they said that, well, as this line basically indicates, that a lot of builds these days are mine, trap, totem, and autocast through cast on crits, poet's pen type based. So we've moved away from the self-cast meta from a long time ago to all this sort of just alternate ways of casting your spells. I personally think there's still plenty of good self-cast options at the moment. It's only as strong as the skills that exist. So you're looking at things like Magma Orb, Blade Vortex, Winter Orb, Ice Nova, Scorching Ray, just plenty of still good things, but it just depends on how strong that skill is, and ultimately it becomes fairly competitive self-cast compared to all of those other options. It's just that a lot of people would rather go the most powerful route and also the easiest route, and that's why self-cast is kind of struggling at the moment as a sort of archetype. But that's what they're going to try and address, and that's what's happening over here. So it says, for this expansion, we focused on putting power back in the hands of casters, rewarding players who cast skills directly. And through quick skimming of the buffs and all that, I'd say it's going to be pretty damn strong to self-cast this league, because like I said, it's already fairly good, and it's already pretty hard to scale up melee and attack base to compare to spells, and it's going to be even harder to do so. So they've adjusted quite a few things. They've also reviewed the VAR skills and skills from items, a small number of spells that we consider too powerful for their ease of use, like Brands, Winter Orb, and Blade Vortex, had their damage lowered, and the full numbers will be in the patch notes. I did recently play Winter Orb. I have played Brand this league, and I've played plenty of Blade Vortex. And yes, I was pretty vocal about how easy and how rewarding it is for how little you do with those skills. So if they're not changing mechanically, and it sounds like they're not, they'll probably still be very good. It's just, you know, a damage nerf, which means you're going to have to bring up some of your skills levels and some of your gear to still do the same sort of damage. But if they're mechanically as strong as they currently are, then they should still be extremely strong, and I wouldn't worry too much about your Winter Orb starter going to shit. It should still be good, I think. They did mention that most skills have had some sort of a power increase, maybe just numerically, but a lot have had actual straight up rebalances. We've seen that in a few already, and that's some good stuff too. It's always exciting to actually up the numbers on a bunch of skills and make them viable, because a lot of skills simply need a numbers tweak and then they're actually playable, and it's like you've got a bunch of new skills out there to fuck around with. They said mana cost has been adjusted, pretty much lowered across the board, but I don't think that matters too much for the most part. Spellcaster builds have plenty of ways to get mana back at the moment, and it's really not a problem if you get some mana regen nodes, a few mana regen items here or there, and some minus mana cost gear. So that's not a too big one for me. As well as that, the focus amulet that I used on my Ice Nova makes casting free during focus, which is, you know, a heavy point of casting for 4 seconds or so. So I don't think that's too big a deal. They did lower the cast speed or cast time on a lot of sort of skills that were a bit longer on cast time. They mentioned Discharge, Glacial Cascade, Arc, Ice Nova, shit like that, just so it's a bit quicker, a bit more intuitive to use those skills, and that's good. Shouldn't be too much of a game-changing thing, but definitely something that is worth mentioning. And then plenty of things got their area increased that had shitty area basically for no reason. So that might encompass things like your Shock Novas, maybe a Storm Call, who knows. We'll wait and see on that, but that's a good change, because area it can be good, but it takes a lot of investment and typically weaker than projectile stuff, which can just do everything everywhere. Other than that, few other changes. They say they lowered the cooldown on Convocation. That's a summoner thing. Spark will be able to re-hit a target it has pierced after a short delay, so that makes Spark just a bit stronger, especially with Pierce, bouncing, faster proj, duration. Spark is currently still pretty good. I made one last league and it was fairly strong, so that's a nice little buff there too. Unearthed projectiles fly much faster, which is fine as well for your VDs, but it's not really something I ever noticed being a problem, so cool. Arc also has a lower chain distance, so it won't bounce between distant packs of enemies. That may be the entire Arc change they're talking about, because they said Arc was going to be nerfed. Slightly buffed here though for self-cast. If that's the entire change for Arc, it's still going to be very strong. I expect maybe a little number tweak on Arc to go down as well, but we'll see how that goes. Currently, it seems like Arc should still be very much a staple in the new league. They say a number of support gems that have fallen behind others in power and utility are receiving some numerical and mechanical adjustments. So you're looking at Chain, Fork, Spell Cascade, Innovate, just some utility stuff that do different things for your skills. Going to get some number adjustments. So previously, for example, Pierce used to have like no additional damage, and then it gained 20% more, 30% more, something like that, and all builds started using Pierce quite a few years ago. That could happen again here if Chain gets, you know, some big love for damage reduction. Fork, Spell Cascade, that means that there could be a new sort of Chain meta or Fork meta for projectiles. Arcane Surge support now is a damage multiplier at higher gem levels, which probably still doesn't matter. I think it's for the most part just going to be utility attached to your Orb of Storms. Actually using it as a gem link is almost always not going to be worth it unless it has quite a bit more damage, like we're talking at least 20%, and it could, who knows. Onslaught and Summon Phantasm now have effects on hitting rare and unique enemies, which should just be nice for leveling, but unless you're actually speccing into Summon Phantasm, maybe you can actually do some summoner stuff with that too. Beats me, I don't do it. Curses, this is kind of a big one. Powerful bosses, especially Elder and Shaper, previously had significantly less effect of curses on them to stop temporal chains and enfeeble trivializing their encounters. So currently curses basically do nothing against these endgame bosses, pretty close to nothing. It's like 80% reduction. So you really didn't worry about curses for endgame encounters, and you only cared about getting your curses for delves and general mapping. That's going to be reversed a bit, so we've now lowered this curse effect reduction to let damage curses provide more worthwhile bonuses, and then temp chains and enfeeble have a separate value that still mean they're going to be shitter against rares and uniques, which is fair because they are extremely strong defensively. So the fact that you can then stack a few curses, you know, 1, 2, maybe even 3 damage curses for some builds against bosses is going to mean that's a huge damage boost on certain builds, and cursing again will be pretty desired. So the Occultist just looks like another Occultist buff, and there's been lots of those in the past couple weeks announced. So Occultist could well be just straight up flavor of the month this league if curses get that kind of a boost and not many other ascendancies get too many other buffs. Curses should become extremely strong for plenty of builds, and that's what you want to see because it's hard to get certain additional curses and it's rewarding to use them. You then have Energy Shield Leech. So that's kind of a new thing to the game. We've added multiple sources of Energy Shield Leech to the game on new support gem and for spells on passive skills. So there's going to be a few notable passives on the passive tree that you just spec into and get you like 0.6% Energy Shield Leech, meaning you don't have to go out of your way to get Warlord's Mark on everything as a caster, especially as an Energy Shield caster. And for the most part, people basically use Energy Shield as pure regen or recovery. Now Leech should be a viable option because they have a, what they say is Energy Shield currently has a lower cap on max restored leech per second than Life Leech, so 10% instead of the 20, but with the Energy Shield passives, that'll let you increase the number. Ghost Reaver doubles it, which is a no-brainer for every Energy Shield Leech build anyway, in addition to turning all Life Leech into Energy Shield Leech and lowering your shield recharge rate, so that's still a downside, but it shouldn't really matter because you're going to be Leech based. So that means that it's going to be pretty damn strong to get Energy Shield Leech and then be a viable sort of caster tank. Occultists, Tricksters, they're going to be pretty fucking strong this league, I think, especially as spellcasters. Leech length nerf. So previously there was no upper limit on how much an individual leech effect could restore. This meant that a very high damage hit with enough leech could last minutes, if not longer, if you had an effect letting your leech remain on full life. Now there is a limit of 10% restored per leech effect, so each individual leech effect can't last more than 5 seconds, and for the Ascendant Slayer passive this is 5% lower. So currently if you're playing a Slayer and you hit something extremely hard, you will have a huge amount of overleech on your character, which, as they say, can apply for a very long time. Typically, for a character just normally built, you're looking at something like 20 seconds of your health going every time you get hit, just constantly topping up, and it's very, very strong defensively. It's a justifiable nerf for sure, but it does leave Slayer in a bit of a tricky situation if they haven't changed anything or buffed it. That may come in the next large patch, but currently that does mean that there's not much real reason to use a Slayer, and it's even less reason after this. I think Ascendant Slayer and Slayer Overleech is still very strong and still very good even with this 5-second thing. There's just less reason to go it now. So I don't think it's the end of the world, as people are saying, oh no, the Overleech, it's gone. Or worse, it's really not. For the most part, 5 seconds is still plenty of time to have huge Overleech. There's just going to be a few little uncomfortable windows in between certain immunity phases on bosses where you're going to have to like make sure you don't take damage while you can't Overleech, because typically take Valpak means you don't have any regen, and it can get a little dicey. But 5 seconds for this Overleech mechanic, which I believe should basically be a given right for every character, given how strong it is still going to be plenty good. And my latest character that I'm going to put up a video on soon for Ascendant Slayer Overleech, that stuff is stupid compared to characters that don't have it, so it deserves a bit of a nerf, or to be given everywhere else. In any case, they did change a bunch of stuff to the passive tree. So as we mentioned, Energy Shield Leech is now going to be on the passive tree. Boosts your damage a bit here or there. Part of the Fire, Cold, Lightning, Heart notables, so specific Leech there too. Shadow area of the tree also has a small amount of new Evasion Energy Shield path, as well as some Energy Leech. So that's going to be good. You're probably going to be speccing into that on just about every Energy Shield character that has any spells for sure. They should always be worth it. The caster weapon passives, so currently things like staff passives, there's some dueled ones that give cast speed. Those are being adjusted, so we've added and adjusted a number of passive tree clusters that affect staves, dual wielding, and shields for casters, provide powerful bonuses to spells that were previously only found on very generic skills, including a lot of cast speed for casters that are dual wielding. That's huge quality of life. Getting like an extra 30-40% cast speed on a caster that self-casts is night and day compared to not having it. It's very nice to be able to just casually get that throughout the passive tree. A lot of damage defenses for those using shields, and bonuses to area of effect for staves. We've also made various additions and improvements to some underutilized passives that affect spellcasters. So should be very good. Currently, I don't think spellcasters have too many problems, and that's only going to make them stronger, I think. Elemental damage wheel. Wheel of passives to the left of the Templar starting area, and has fewer elemental damage skills and a single powerful elemental notable that combines some of the power of the 2 previous elemental notables. It includes 2 new notables that work very well with the new spells that convert physical damage to fire or lightning. That's talking about the little wheel that's got a triangle in it, I believe, and it's pretty damn strong right now. You usually don't take much of it, so throwing away some of the fluff and just making it stronger is pretty much a good thing, and just going to make that entire Templar side of the tree all that much more desirable. Shadow starting passives, they said they've adjusted stuff, and I can't really go into this too much, don't know. Just going to be a bit more streamlined. There's plenty of little awkward clusters on the shadow thing, and stuff you almost never take, so yeah, adjusting that should be a good thing. They've added some channeling passives, 2 new passive tree clusters that provide damage bonuses for channeled skills, as well as some defensive properties while channeling, like stun avoidance and fizz damage reduction. They've teased one of these already, and it's just a node that gives you some physical damage reduction, some cast speed, that sort of stuff. So those should be pretty good and no-brainers for well, probably no-brainers for most channeled skill builds, and maybe, just maybe, it's going to be a pretty rough passive tree to navigate in the new patch when you want absolutely everything. You then have Trickster. They said that Trickster's basically got its own unique niche as evasion and energy shield sort of stuff, but it's not very utilized because it is still a bit tough to build into and a bit more confusing, I'd say. So They're going to change that up a bit, rework significantly, providing unique and powerful reward for going into ES and evasion at the same time, which is pretty underutilized. So Ghost Dance now creates a Ghost Shroud every second up to a maximum of 3. So you're getting 3 Ghost Shroud stacks after 3 seconds. After you hit, a Ghost Shroud is consumed, restoring energy shield based on your evasion rating. That sounds pretty damn good. It's like an auto life flask for energy shield, which currently there isn't much of that out there for energy shield recovery that instantly. Ghost Dance and Escape Artist now have other bonuses based on your Ghost Shrouds, so that sounds pretty damn strong for energy shield bonuses over there, especially when you factor in we've also added Frenzy and Power Charge generation while channeling to the Swift Killer node to let a channeling Trickster generate charges during tough encounters. So the Frenzy and Power Charge node that the Trickster currently has is pretty damn strong, gives you an extra Frenzy and Power Charge, and has really good on-kill effects for sustain. While using the channeled skills, if you can get those beefed up throughout fights with your channeled skills, then that's going to be really strong for Trickster, because it's currently a very good ascendancy. It's very fast, it's very tanky, and for the most part, there's enough damage on the good skills that you don't really have to go into huge amounts of damage. So utility is pretty king in those cases, and Trickster has plenty of that. Trickster, ES, Evasion, plus Channel should be a very strong combo in this league, and I may have to do some of those, because I've played some Tricksters in the past, and if you have the damage there, they are some of the most enjoyable characters to play. Then Inquisitor was reworked, so the Consecrated Ground notables just make the sustain of Consecrated Ground a lot better. So the ones that you currently get for Energy Shield, Pious Path, and I played that this league as a low life Winter Orb character if you want to check that out. It's already pretty good, but having it just affect you after you've left Consecrated Ground, having it spawn under you whenever you're standing still, this makes it a lot nicer, and that's totally fine. So all good things for buffs there. Changes work well with a change to all Consecrated Ground that causes hits against enemies in it to have a 100% increased critical strike chance, which is a pretty good quality of life for your crit builds as an Inquisitor. You then also have other changes. Critical strike chance. It says previously an effect that could critically hit was capped at 5% minimum, meaning you couldn't go below 5% crit, and 95% max, can't go above. We've set both of these caps to 0 and 100. So that is a slight nerf to elemental overload builds that use controlled destruction, because controlled destruction lowers your crit chance, and currently that lowers it to 5. At this point, that's probably going to lower most of those spells to 0, and you won't really be proccing elemental overload with those spells. I don't think it's a very big deal, because most of those types of builds should be running an alternate elemental overload sustained device like an Orb of Storms or a Storm Brand attached to crit strikes. So I don't think that's a huge deal, because you still keep up your elemental overload that way, but obviously it's slightly more annoying in that context. The next line that reads effects that gave enemies an additional chance to be critically hit have all been changed to instead increase the critical chance, the chance of critical hits against them, or give additional critical chance before modifiers, as if the attack had critical bonuses against the target rather than additional chance added on top. I don't know. Don't really see how that changes anything, or maybe I'm just too stupid to understand it, so we'll move on. Non-chaos has extra chaos damage on weapons. So currently the stacking that my Winter Orb character, for example, did was based around non-chaos damage with hits as extra chaos, and it is very strong because of the multiple conversions. If you start out as 100%, let's say cold damage, convert 100% cold to 100% fire, and then use non-chaos as chaos extra damage, that means you're getting extra damage from the fire and then extra damage from the cold, which is a bit overpowered at the moment, so you're double dipping on this non-extra chaos, and they've identified that as an issue, and they say they're going to tone that down a bit. So that's basically what all of that is going on about. Existing items won't be affected, and we'll be looking at other source of the stat like unique items and Tricksters Harness the Void in the future. It's not currently overpowered, Harness the Void, because the numbers are kind of meh, but it could get a change so that it becomes either stronger by itself, or so it's not as good for all this double dipping stuff. We'll have to see how that plays out. +1 Max Totem Availed Mod. This modifier is no longer available since it's very good, they say. It's now only a Shaper mod, so you have to find a Shaper shield and roll that mod yourself, which is fine. It's actually pretty good that you can kind of control it that much easier now, because yeah, the high end of being able to craft your own shield and then putting on the extra totem support, it's pretty damn strong, but it costs a lot, and then on top of that, I didn't find it, that Veiled mod, and I played for the entire 3 months of the league, so it's pretty rare as well. Crafting your own Shaper shields for this should be kind of fun, and you can still make very strong ones, even just isolating the mod and then multi-modding around that. So I think that's a nice little change. They said they're going to nerf some uniques, few uniques items that were problematic. Details will be in the patch notes tomorrow. We're probably looking at things like Impulsor, maybe things like Loreweave. Not too sure how many other things, maybe Atziri's Flask, maybe Poet's Pen, Unnatural Instinct, Jewel. That'd be some of the guesses, but who knows. Plenty of things that are overpowered slide in from patch to patch completely untouched, so we just have to wait and see what that is, but that is a confirmation there will be some sort of nerfs out there. And then of course damage immunity, said they've made a few changes to how things work, because currently you can get yourself up to 100% elemental immune damage with certain mechanics and then delve really deep. For the most part, that's what it's used for. So now player max resist can never go above 90, so you can never be 100% immune to certain elements. Any max res you would otherwise have will have no effect over 90%. This is especially important as Synthesis introduces other source of max resist. So it should be a bit easier to get to that 90%, which most of us don't currently do. But the people that go over 90, well, you're fucked. Vile Impurity auras now provide less damage taken to their element and have a less aura effect per level. Gluttony of Elements now also provides curse immunity to prevent interactions with temp chains, letting it last longer. And that's just talking about the immune builds that use the Gluttony of Elements to sustain their immunity for a longer time, because they self-curse themselves with temp chains. That's totally fine, doesn't really affect me. It's only going to affect the super deep delvers for the most part, and I mean, that shouldn't matter. You're just going to have to find another way or challenge yourself in another way to go deeper in delving, and ultimately if you're not doing 7,000 depth anymore and the hardest content is 3,000, what the hell does that matter? So no immunity, just creates more of a playstyle that should promote skill rather than building a specific way of just negating everything. I assume it shouldn't really affect me or most of us anyway. So there are plenty of other changes in our list for the future. Attacks need the same level of attention, if not more. Spells are getting in 3.6, as well as changes to Abyssal Joules and physical weapon damage, but we'll be saving those for 3.7 and beyond, so that they get full-blown patches for themselves, and then the patch notes are slated for tomorrow. So attacks will probably get a big revamp and get very strong in the next big expansion as well. And, you know, more power creep, more fun. But plenty of attack skills just need numerical upgrades. Plenty of them need mechanical upgrades. And hopefully they get something like what the spells got this time, which is all pretty good changes. You then have Abyssal Joules, which, with my latest character, as I'll reveal a video at some point soon, are pretty damn strong, and definitely too strong in their current form. And then of course we have the patch notes tomorrow, as I mentioned, but all I got to say about that is I usually do a sort of drunk patch note reading in my afternoon, which should be in something like 12 hours from now, plus another 24, something like 34 hours from now. I usually log on, read the entire patch notes extremely slowly while getting massively sidetracked and getting pretty buzzed on something. So if you want to watch that, feel free to tune in. It's a long day for me indeed. But that's typically what we wait for. Get the patch notes, then we can start building some, you know, certain starter builds and theory crafting and all that, so we don't pick anything before then, and then we play the game. So the next few days should be pretty exciting. Wait for the patch notes and everything else that's going to be released, and otherwise, guys, I will see you in Synthesis League. Hope you enjoyed this little breakdown. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.